We are looking today at one of the single coolest pieces of hardware that ever came out of the early 2000s. This device is so cool that it is included in an item called the James Bond Spy Gear collection, something like that. It was a um, a piece of like a little kit that you could get as a go along with Casino Royale, and it just had some James Bond stuff in it. But apparently they used this in the movie Casino Royale. So I have it sitting on the docking station, and this is fully functional. These are not easy to find. You can find you can find them on eBay. But usually they have things wrong with them. They have dead batteries, and a dead battery is a problem because the battery for these things is like $350 now. The battery is worth almost as much as the device. So one of these things with a good working battery, I think could be worth like $600 or $700, which it will probably go up. This is considered a collector's item. This is also the deal that got me hooked on deals. So let's pull this out here. Let's see if you can, looking at my phone, I've got my camera rigged to my phone. I'm trying to see how well you can see oh yeah, okay, you can see that. Okay, so check this out. So it's got touch screen. Where is it? So it's Windows. So at the moment I'm running, you see Windows XP. I actually have it dual booted. XP and Windows 8. Everybody can hate on 8, but it was a better option than 7 for the particular use case. And then it does this. Watch this. Oh yeah. So for those of you that are familiar with these, so this is the GPD Win 3. This was the first device since the Vaio UX that actually copied this overall form factor. So this will do anything like, let's see, do I have, let's see, what do I have installed on here? It doesn't look like no, I never actually installed anything on here. I think when I was using it with Windows 8 for the most part. But it is faster with Windows XP, and it did get noticeably better battery life with Windows XP as well. These devices had what was called a Core Solo, which was essentially an early Core 2 Duo processor, but with one core. So it was the same core, which back in the day, they were very fast cores. They were considered some of the fastest cores that you could get. So back in the day, it wasn't really regarded as slow. There was a guy on the Micro PC Talk forum, which was kind of the forum that all of us were on back then, that figured out how to desolder the CPU and install a Core 2 Duo in its place. I considered having it done with mine, but I never really had the money. If I had the money I have today, back then, I probably would have done it, but I just never got around to it. I see them go up on eBay every so often. They're usually, I don't know, $600 to $800 for the people that sell them. These things were around, I think, $1,500 back in the day. The only reason I ended up with this, because I was broke back then. I didn't have that kind of money for a toy like this back then. So the reason I ended up with this was because, like I said, it was the very first deal that got me into deal making. Okay, so this thing I picked up back in 2006 when they were current for $500, which if you know what this is, you know that that's a screaming deal. At $500, it's actually useful. At the price that they wanted for these things, they were really more of a niche item. They did also use these later on in Stargate Atlantis as well. I can't remember. I think Rodney McKay would always be kind of hunched over it, doing his thing, you know. It's got a few other cool features. It's got a fingerprint reader, which still works, surprisingly enough. I actually used it to log into my Windows XP install. So my fingerprints are the same too, I guess. So that's all cool. Because I haven't used this since the screen went out. I haven't used this in probably 5 or 6 years. I don't even remember the last time I pulled this thing out for a video. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. I actually am very much surprised that the battery still works. In fact, when I looked at the data on the battery, it appeared that it was still like almost 90% good. So it only had, I think it only had like 5 or 6. No, it was above that. It was like 95%. It only had like 5 or 6% wear level on it, which really surprises me. I thought my battery was toast at this point. It did have an early implementation of cellular. I don't know if that was standard or if it was an added thing. What I actually used this for back in the day before my music collection really ballooned, back in the day when my music collection was only a couple of gigs, I would have this in my car, up in my window, mounted on a Ram brand mount, if you know what those are, and it would just sit there and it ran all my music. That's what I originally used it for, which is kind of what got me into the idea of an in-car computer. I never really used it, shall we say, in the field for this, but I did test, and it was able to run Halo. The original Halo was able to run at a playable frame rate and detail level on this thing. It was actually really interesting. It's a really low-res screen, so it doesn't take a lot of horsepower. It's got a 1024 by 600 resolution screen, which back then was something to call home about. Back then, devices like this usually had like 800 by 480 or something like that. I think a bunch of the Samsung versions did. Now, this is considered the absolute apex of the UMPC generation era devices. So today, we have these. Now, this is effectively more or less the same thing in modern form. However, the UX was designed as a business tool. The UX was never meant to be a gaming device. Like, you could, any game that would run, especially older like Windows 98 games that were like, you know, transferred over, you could run on this thing. It would run them, but it was never intended as a gaming device. I think $1,500 was a little bit more money back then than it is today too. So $1,500 is probably, I don't know, $3,000 in today's money or something. There's been a lot of inflation. So put this back up again. The keyboard is backlit. I don't know if you can actually, can you see that? Is it on? Oh, let's try it again. Okay, yeah, you can see it. You can kind of see that blue sheen. See if it goes out, and you can see when it goes out. Come on. Oh yeah, there it goes. You can kind of tell it went off. I'll have to look in the video later and see if it's actually visible. It does have a camera. Let's see if the camera works. Can't remember if I ever... Vaio camera utility. Let's see. I think I may have hooked it up to a... Oh, it does still work. Check it out. Okay. Let's see here. Let's see. This is actually kind of cool that everything still works on this thing. Maybe not the front camera. Oh, wait. Okay, so we're not getting anything out of the front camera. But as is generally the case, the rear-facing camera is generally better quality. So let me see if you can see. Oh yeah, look at that. I'm sorry, this is actually really cool. I'd forgotten how awesome this piece of hardware was. And the fact that I'm still able to use it today, I mean, really tells you that this thing has quite a bit of longevity to it. I'm sure there are probably some people today still using these. Yeah, looks like my battery's draining pretty fast. The battery was always a real limitation on this. Now, they did offer a extended battery, a double life battery. Is this huge thing that stuck out of the side. It was never really, Yeah, I never got the big battery. They were expensive back in the day too. I mean, I think they were back then, I mean, it probably was like $199 or something, which for me was a lot of money back then. Um, in fact, I think the battery I have in here now is a non-Sony original. And I don't think I can put a new battery in it because I believe that the battery I put in here had a requirement for a modified BIOS that I installed on it. And I don't know if I could swap. I think I looked a while back and I couldn't figure out how to swap the BIOS back. And I doubt I can find a battery with that exact configuration again. So once the battery on this is toast, it's probably toast. If I want to retain one of these, I'll probably just have to go buy a new one. It's also so my electronics in this thing are original. This is the original device electronically, but I did swap over a couple of years ago, like 5 or 6 years. That's longer than that. Maybe 8 or 9 years ago, a buddy of mine that worked at a recycle center got the lower end slightly lower. So they sold them with, it was the same device, but 512 megs versus a gig of RAM. You really needed that gig of RAM. The 512, just even back then, you needed the gig. But it was the same casing and screen and everything. And so what I ended up doing was swapping my board and everything over. I did also do the 64 gig SSD upgrade to this, which because this is so slow by modern standards, every little bit that you can get helps. It does have a Sony memory stick reader, which I'm pretty sure is effectively dead tech now. I'll have to look and see if I can get a bigger memory card. I don't think you were ever able to get a memory card to like micro SD, but I'll have to look. It might be possible. I'm trying to think, what else does this thing do? It's got a standard USB port on the side, which I actually ran after a while. I ended up, when I upgraded my music collection to more music, I ended up doing plugging an external hard drive in with like a L USB adapter and running a cable down and running all my music. I did that for a while before this device just got kind of overwhelmed with that purpose. But anyway, I hope you guys find this really interesting. It's an absolutely fascinating piece of, early 2000s technology that I think a lot of you know what this is, but you just never could afford one. I actually, like I said, I had this the whole time, and I still have it now. It's one of those pieces of hardware that will probably go to my death with me. I will probably never unload this. Maybe someday, if this becomes like some super duper expensive piece of hardware, if I'm not in the greatest financial position or I want the money for something else, I may end up pawning it off to get money for, some other gadget, but I plan on keeping it. So anyway, again, I hope you guys found this interesting, and thanks for watching.